The dust had settled on Holt S. boots long before the truck appeared on his property. 3 years of quiet in this forgotten stretch of Texas scrubland had dulled his senses, but not enough that he didn't to recognize the sound of desperation in an engine pushed too hard down a dirt road that hadn't had seen maintenance since the county went broke. Holt set down his coffee mug on the porch rail, the ceramic worn smooth where his thumb always rested. The truck stopped 30 yards from his cabin, its red paint blistered by too many summers. Through the heat ripples, Holt recognized Mercer S.'s lanky frame unfolding from the driver S side. They hadn't spoken since Fallujah, where Mercer had borrowed money that Holt knew he'd never see again but gave anyway because men who had seen the same hell didn't say no to each other. "Thought you might be died out here," Mercer called, his voice carried away by the wind that always seemed to blow from nowhere to nowhere across this land. Holt did not answer. Silence had become his language of choice. Mercer approached, limping slightly. The war had marked them both differently. "I came to settle up," he said. The words hung between them. Absurd after all this time. Holt's gaze drifted to the truck where a shadow shifted behind the passenger window. Something about the smallness of the movement made the hair on Holt's neck rise. "Donnie T need your money," Holt said, the words rough from disuse. Mercer's laugh was too loud, too forced. "Ain't T offering money?" He turned and made a beckoning gesture toward the truck. The passenger door opened slowly and a girl stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 16, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her eyes downcast. She wore jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, both too big for her frame. She stood motionless beside the truck, a small backpack clutched to her chest like armor. Something cold and familiar settled in Holt's stomach. The same feeling he had before entering buildings in Fallujah, before the world would explode into chaos and blood. "What is this?" Holt asked, though he already knew. The knowledge sat like lead in his gut. "She is yours now," Mercer said, as if he were talking about a dog or a piece of furniture. "Worth more than what I owed you. Consider the debt paid with interest." The girl didn't look up, didn't move. "Her name, S. Elena," Mercer added, almost as an afterthought. "She cooks, cleans. Doesn't talk much, which I figure suits you fine." Holt's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. "You've lost your mind." "Lost everything else first?" Mercer said with a shrug. "Look, I'm doing you a favor. Place like this needs a woman's touch. She has a child. She is better off here than where she was headed." Something flickered across Mercer's face, something that reminded Holt of the man he'd once known. "Trust me on that." A hawk screamed overhead, circling in widening arcs. Holt stepped off the porch, his boots raising small clouds of dust. The girl flinched almost imperceptibly as he approached, though her eyes remained fixed on the ground. "Get in your truck and leave," Holt told Mercer, his voice low. "Take her with you." Mercer's face hardened. "Can't do that." "You can, you will." "There are people expecting me to deliver her somewhere," Mercer said, lowering his voice. "Bad people. This was my way out." "Your way out is my problem now?" "You owe me," Mercer hissed. "After what happened to Davis or Donmere," the single word came out like a bullet. The girl's eyes flicked up then, just for a moment, dark and knowing in a way that no child's eyes should be. She'd heard this kind of negotiation before, Holt realized. She knew what it meant to be currency. "They'll come looking," Mercer said, already backing toward his truck. "They'll come here. But you know how to handle that kind of trouble. I done T." He reached the driver's door. "She's got papers in her bag. Birth certificate, school records, all you need." "Forgeries," Holt knew without asking. "Mercer," he called, but the man was already climbing into the cab. "She is worth more alive to you than I am dead to them," Mercer called through the open window. The engine roared to life. "I'm sorry, brother." The truck reversed in a spray of gravel, then lurched forward down the road. Holt watched until it disappeared behind a rise, the dust cloud hanging in the air like an accusation. When he turned back, the girl, Elena, hadn't moved. Her knuckles were white where they gripped the backpack. I'm not keeping you, Holt said, though he knew she probably didn't believe him. But you can't stay here alone either. For the first time she spoke, her voice so quiet he almost didn't hear it over the wind. Where will you send me? The question hung between them, unanswerable. They both knew there was nowhere safe, not really. Not for a girl who'd been handed off like property. Inside the cabin, the phone Holt rarely used began to ring. They both stared at the door, as if they could see through it to whatever new complication was calling. Come inside, he said finally. We'll figure something out. She followed him up the steps, her footfalls so light they made no sound on the weathered wood. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of rain, though the sky remained clear. Somewhere in the distance, thunder muttered a warning only Holt seemed to hear. The phone kept ringing. Holt let it, watching as Elena stood just inside the doorway, taking in the sparse interior of his cabin with quick, assessing glances. The single room served as kitchen, living room, and bedroom, with a small bathroom partitioned off in one corner. There was little to see. A bed with military corners, a table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf filled with dog-eared paperbacks, a wood stove. Nothing personal, nothing that told a story, except the box. Her gaze lingered on it. A wooden ammo crate on the highest shelf, padlocked shut. Holt had the sudden urge to turn it to face the wall, to hide whatever secret she thought she could read from its scarred surface. The phone finally fell silent. Holt gestured to the table. Sit. She obeyed immediately, perching on the edge of the chair as if prepared to flee. The backpack remained clutched to her chest. When is the last time you ate? He asked. She shrugged, a barely perceptible movement of her shoulders. Holt moved to the small refrigerator, his back to her as he pulled out eggs and butter. The familiar motions of cooking would give him time to think, time to push down the rage building in his chest. Not at her, at Mercer, at whoever had traded her like livestock, at a world that allowed such things to happen. I don't need to be fed, she said softly behind him. Holt cracked eggs into a bowl with more force than necessary. Everyone needs to eat. I can work, I can clean, I can... Stop. The word came out sharper than he intended. He turned to find her eyes downcast again, her body tense. You don't need to earn your keep here, you were not staying. A flicker of something, fear, resignation, crossed her face before it settled back into careful blankness. I am going to make some calls, Holt continued, turning back to the stove. There are people who help with situations like this. The police? Her voice held a note of panic. No, not yet anyway. The skillet hissed as he dropped in a pat of butter. There's a woman in town, Miss Grady. She volunteers with the church, helps people who need it. She'll know what to do. Elena said nothing, but he could feel her disbelief like a physical presence in the room. The eggs were nearly done when headlights swept across the cabin windows. Holt tensed, hand automatically reaching for a weapon that was not there anymore. He moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Sheriff, he said quietly. Elena was on her feet in an instant, backpack clutched to her chest. I can hide, she whispered. Holt shook his head. No need. Sit down, eat your eggs. He slid the plate across the table, then added, let me do the talking. Sheriff Vaughn was an imposing figure, tall and broad, with a drooping mustache that did little to soften his face. He removed his hat as he stepped onto the porch. Holt, he said with a nod when the door opened. His gaze moved past Holt to where Elena sat at the table. Heard you had company. Small towns. Nothing stayed secret for long. Just passing through, Holt said, not inviting him in. Vaughn nodded slowly. That's so? Because I got a call saying Ray Mercer dropped a girl off here, said it looked unusual. Who called? Does it matter? Vaughn's eyes hadn't left Elena. Young lady, you okay in there? She nodded without looking up. She related to you, Holt? The question carried weight. No. Mind telling me what she is doing here then? Holt considered his options. The truth would raise more questions, might bring attention neither he nor Elena could afford. She's my goddaughter, he lied smoothly. Her father was in my unit. It's in a bad way right now, asked if she could stay with me a few days until he sorts himself out. Von Ey's expression didn't change. That her story too? Yes, sir, Elena said, her voice stronger than Holt had yet heard it. My dad and Mr. Holt served together. The lie came easily to her, too easily. Holt wondered how many other lies she'd been forced to tell. What is your name, miss? Elena Parker. No hesitation. And your father's name? A momentary pause. James Parker. Everyone calls him Jimmy. Vaughn looked back at Holt. Don't recall you mentioning any Jimmy Parker before. Don't recall discussing my war buddies with you, Sheriff. The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Vaughn replaced his hat. Towny-ass talking, Holt, you know how it is. Young girl turns up at a single-man-ass place. Let them talk. Some folks remember Davis, remember what happened over there. Holt's face hardened. Davis has nothing to do with this. Maybe not. Vaughn stepped back. But I'll be checking on this Jimmy Parker, making sure he knows where his daughter is. You do that, Holt said, already closing the door. Through the window, he watched Vaughn's cruiser pull away, then turned to find Elena standing, her plate untouched. Thank you, she said, for not telling him. Sit down and eat. She obeyed, picking up the fork and taking small, careful bites. What's in the backpack? Holt asked. Elena froze, then slowly set down her fork. Just my things. Clothes, mostly. And the papers Mercer mentioned? She hesitated, then unzipped the bag and removed a manila envelope. Holt took it and emptied the contents onto the table. A birth certificate, school records, immunization forms, all listing her as Elena Parker, age 16, born in El Paso. These are fake, Holt said. She didn't deny it. Among the papers was a photograph, creased and worn, a younger Elena, perhaps 12, standing beside a woman with the same dark eyes. Behind them was a small house with a flowering vine climbing the porch. Your mother? Holt asked. Elena nodded, her finger tracing the edge of the photo. She died last year. I am sorry. The words felt inadequate. And your real father? I never knew him. Holt studied her face, trying to read the truth in it. How did you end up with Mercer? She looked away. My mother owed money to some men. After she died, they said I had to work it off. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. Mr. Mercer worked for them. He was supposed to take me to a house in San Antonio. The implication hung in the air, unspoken. Holt returned the papers to the envelope and stood abruptly, moving to the window. In the distance, heat lightning illuminated the horizon for a brief moment. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Who are these men? He asked finally. I don't know their names. They own businesses in Laredo. Her voice dropped. They own lots of girls like me. Holt closed his eyes. He had left the war, but the war had not left the world. Different battlefield, same corruption, same exploitation of the vulnerable. You can go back to them, he said. They all come looking. Let them. She studied him, really looked at him for the first time. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Holt's gaze drifted to the locked box on the shelf. Inside was everything he'd tried to forget. His medals, his dog tags, the letter from Davis' mother, and the small, sand-covered teddy bear he'd found in the rubble of a house they'd been ordered to clear. The house where everything had gone wrong. Because I've walked away before, he said finally. Never again. Miss Grady's house sat on the edge of town, a small bungalow with a riot of wildflowers growing in the front yard. Holt parked his truck a block away, instructing Elena to keep her head down as they walked the rest of the distance. It was just past dawn, the town still mostly asleep. The old woman answered on the first knock, as if she'd been waiting for them. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and though she must have been in her 70s, her eyes were sharp as she took in the girl at Holt's side. "Figured you would show up eventually," she said, holding the screen door open. "I'll come on in before someone sees you." Inside, the house smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Miss Grady ushered them into a kitchen where a pot bubbled on the stove and a fat orange cat dozed on a windowsill. "Sheriff E.S. been asking questions," she said without preamble, pouring 3 mugs of coffee. "Sit, both of you. You look like you haven't slept." They hadn't a tea. After the sheriff's visit, Holt had stayed awake, watching the road through the window while Elena curled up on his bed, her eyes open in the darkness. "I need your help, May," Holt said, using her first name, a liberty from the days when she taught him in high school before he enlisted before everything. "You always did." She set the mugs on the table and sat across from them. "Now tell me what kind of trouble this child is in." Holt glanced at Elena. She nodded slightly. Permission. He told Miss Grady everything, watching her face grow grimmer with each detail. When he finished, she turned to Elena. "Is there anyone else? Anyone who might help you?" Elena shook her head. "My mother had a sister in California, but we haven't talked to her in years. I don't even know if she was still alive." Miss Grady nodded slowly. "I have a friend who runs a shelter in Austin. She helps girls in similar situations. I can call her." "When?" Holt asked. "Today. But it might take time to arrange safe transport." She fixed Holt with a stern gaze. "You understand what you've stepped into? These aren't men who give up easily. I understand. They have connections. Police, judges, businessmen." "Not here," Holt said, but without conviction. Miss Grady's laugh was bitter. "Everywhere, boy. Money talks in every county." Elena's hands tightened around her mug. "They'll hurt him because of me." "No, they won tea," Holt said firmly. Miss Grady studied him over the rim of her coffee. "You still have that arsenal out at your place?" "Just a hunting rifle and my service pistol. Might not be enough." A car door slammed outside. Miss Grady moved to the window with surprising agility, peering through the curtain. "Sheriff," she said quietly, "with 2 men I don't recognize." Holt was on his feet instantly. "Back door?" "Through the sunroom." Miss Grady grabbed Elena's arm. "Wait, take these." She hurried to a drawer and pulled out a set of keys. "My brother's hunting cabin, up near the reservoir. No one been there in years. It's stocked with basics, water, some canned goods." Holt took the keys. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just keep her safe." She turned to Elena. "And you, child, trust this man. He has got more ghosts than most, but his heart's still beating." A knock at the front door, heavy, authoritative. "Go," Miss Grady whispered, already moving to answer it, her back straight as a flagpole. They slipped out through the sunroom and into the overgrown backyard. Holt led Elena through a gap in the fence and down an alley that ran behind the row of houses. They walked quickly but didn't run, nothing to draw attention. "We need to get back to my truck," Holt said, keeping his voice low. "They'll be watching it." "Probably." He paused at the corner of the alley, scanning the street. "We'll have to go on foot for now, circle back later." They cut through yards and back streets, avoiding the main roads. The town was waking up now, early risers heading to work, lights coming on in kitchens. Holt kept them in the shadows, moving steadily toward the edge of town, away from his truck, away from his cabin. "Who are they?" Elena asked as they paused in the doorway of an abandoned gas station. "The men with the sheriff? Probably the ones Mercer mentioned. The ones you were supposed to be delivered to." Her face paled. "They found me so quickly. Small town. Not hard to trace a strange truck to my place." Holt peered around the corner. "We need to keep moving." They continued north toward the reservoir. The terrain grew rougher, scrubby mesquite giving way to rocky hills. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them as they walked. Elena stumbled once, twice, unused to the rough ground. "We can rest a minute," Holt said, guiding her to a boulder that offered a sliver of shade. She sank down gratefully, pulling a water bottle from her backpack and taking a careful sip before offering it to him. He drank sparingly. "Why didn't you just give me to the sheriff?" she asked suddenly. Holt handed the water back. "You know why? Because you think he is working with them?" "And because I don't know that he isn't T." Holt scanned the horizon. "And because sometimes the system fails the people who need it most." Elena was quiet for a moment. "In the cabin, you mentioned someone named Davis. And the sheriff did too. Who was he?" Holton's jaw tightened. He hadn't spoken Davis, his name aloud in years, had tried not to even think it. "He was a friend. We served together." "What happened to him?" The memory rose unbidden. Davis, young and earnest, eager to do good in a place where good seemed impossible. Davis, who'd questioned an order Holt hadn't T. Davis, who D paid the price. "We were clearing houses in Fallujah. Standard procedure. Go in, secure the building, move on. But this one house." Holt's voice trailed off. There was a family inside. A mother, 3 kids. The youngest had a toy, something that looked like it could have been a detonator. At least that is what our lieutenant said later. Elena was watching him, her eyes steady. Davis tried to stop him, said they were just civilians, that we needed to slow down, be sure. Holt's throat felt dry. The lieutenant shot them anyway, all of them, said he couldn't take the risk. And Davis? Reported it, went through proper channels, they buried it, said it was a clean operation, threat neutralized. Holt's hands had curled into fists. Davis wouldn't let it go, kept pushing. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Enemy fire is what the report said. But you don't believe that. I know better. Holt stood abruptly. We need to keep moving. They walked in silence for a time, the sun beating down mercilessly. The reservoir appeared ahead, a glittering blue expanse surrounded by stunted trees. The cabin was set back from the water, almost invisible among the foliage. It was small, just one room with a covered porch, but it was solid. Inside, the air was stale but cool. Dust covered every surface. There was a small wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and shelves stocked with canned goods and bottled water. "We'll be safe here for a while," Holt said, testing the single window, making sure it could open if they needed to escape quickly. Elena set her backpack on the table. And then what? Holt had no answer. The men who were looking for her wouldn't stop. Even if Miss Grady's friend in Austin could help, getting Elena there safely would be nearly impossible now. "I need to check the perimeter," he said instead. "Stay inside, away from the window." Outside, Holt circled the cabin, noting approaches, potential hiding spots, anything that could become a threat. The woods were quiet except for the occasional bird call. Too quiet, maybe. He was nearly back to the front porch when he heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel somewhere down the access road. He slipped back into the cabin to find Elena already alert, listening. "Someone's coming," she whispered. "Get your bag," Holt said, moving to the window. A black SUV had stopped about 100 yards away. 3 men got out, 2 in suits despite the heat, 1 in a sheriff's uniform. Not Vaughn, but a deputy Holt did not recognize. "Back door?" Elena asked, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "No back door." Holt's mind raced. "Under the bed, now." She didn't question him, dropping to her stomach and sliding beneath the narrow frame. Holt quickly rearranged the dusty quilt to hang lower, concealing the space beneath. "Whatever happens, whatever you hear, stay hidden," he whispered, crouching beside the bed. "If they find you, you run. Don't look back. Don't to wait for me. Just run for the water and keep going. Holt, promise me." "I promise," she whispered. He straightened and moved to the door just as footsteps sounded on the porch. A heavy knock followed. "Mr. Holt?" a voice called. "Deputy Reeves, County Sheriff's Department. We'd like a word." Holt opened the door but remained in the frame, blocking the view inside. The deputy stood nearest, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Behind him, the 2 suited men watched with empty eyes. "Deputy," Holt acknowledged. "What can I do for you?" We'd be looking for a minor who has been reported missing. 16-year-old girl, Hispanic, goes by Elena. Her guardian S mighty worried about her. Haven't seen any missing girls, Holt said evenly. Mind if we take a look inside? The deputy asked, already moving forward as if the answer was a given. Holt didn't budge. You got a warrant? The deputy's friendly expression hardened. Donity need one if we have reason to believe a missing minor is in danger. What reason would that be? One of the suited men stepped forward. Mr. Holt, I am Miguel Sanchez. I am a representative of the girl's legal guardian. We have documentation. He held up a folder. All we want is to ensure Elena's safety and return her to her proper home. Proper home. The words made Holt's stomach turn. Like I said, haven't seen her. Funny, the second suited man said, speaking for the first time. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Because we have a witness who says he delivered her to your cabin yesterday. Ray Mercer. Remember him? Holt kept his expression neutral. Mercer stopped by. Alone. He says different. He's mistaken. The soft-spoken man smiled thinly. Mr. Holt, you re-interfering in a private family matter. That's not wise. Neither is trafficking minors, Holt replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Which is what I'd call it if someone was forcing a 16-year-old girl to work off her dead mother's debts. The deputy's hand tightened on his weapon. That is a serious accusation. Yes, it is. Sanchez's face had gone carefully blank. Perhaps we should continue this conversation at the station. Perhaps you should get off my property. The soft-spoken man stepped closer, his smile never wavering. The girl is valuable merchandise, Mr. Holt. More valuable than your life, certainly. Give her to us now, and this ends quietly. And if I had her, and if I didn't then we take her anyway, and you become another sad statistic. Veteran with PTSD, tragic but not surprising. Beneath the threat, Holt heard something else. The sound of a boat engine, distant but approaching. All four men turned toward the reservoir. The soft-spoken man nodded to the deputy. Check it out. As the deputy moved away, Holt saw his chance. One moment of distraction, one opportunity. She is not here, he said, drawing the men's attention back to him. But I know where she is, and I'll tell you if you guarantee her safety. The soft-spoken man's eyes narrowed. We are not negotiating. Then I'll never find her. Holt straightened to his full height. Yeah, I've hidden people before in worse places than this. She could disappear so thoroughly you'd spend years looking. It was a bluff, but one that gave the men pause. What do you want? Sanchez asked finally. Proof, Holt said. Show me the documentation you claim to have. Let me verify it, as legitimate. If it is, I'll consider cooperating. The soft-spoken man studied him for a long moment, then nodded to Sanchez, who handed over the folder. Holt opened it, flipping through papers that had the veneer of legitimacy. Guardianship forms, court orders, all bearing official-looking stamps and signatures. All forgeries, he was certain, but sophisticated ones. These don't look right to me, he said, closing the folder. I think I'll have my lawyer review them. You don't have that option, the soft-spoken man said, his hand moving inside his jacket. The deputy's voice called from the shoreline. Sir, you need to see this. Something in his tone made all of them turn. The deputy was standing at the water's edge, pointing at something in the shallows. The soft-spoken man hesitated, torn between dealing with Holt and investigating. Watch him, he told Sanchez, then strode toward the water. Holt used the moment to glance toward the bed. A flicker of movement told him Elena was still there, listening, waiting. Sanchez shifted nervously. You're remaking this harder than it needs to be, am I? She belongs to us, legally. People don't belong to other people, Holt said. Not legally, not morally, not ever. Sanchez's expression darkened. You think you'll be some kind of hero? Saving one girl changes nothing. There are dozens more where she came from. The words hit Holt like a physical blow. Dozens more. Girls like Elena, trapped in debt bondage, treated as property. Tell me about the others, Holt said, his voice dangerously calm. Something in his tone made Sanchez step back. I don't know what you were talking about. The other girls. Where are they? Before Sanchez could answer, the soft-spoken man returned, his face tight with anger. It is a diversion, he snapped. Someone has been here recently, left a trail into the water to make us think they swam away. His hand emerged from his jacket holding a pistol. Enough games. Where is she? Holt's world narrowed to the barrel of the gun and the space behind him where Elena hid. A familiar calm settled over him, the same one he IDD felt in combat when decisions became simple, binary, survive or don a T, protect or fail. Last chance, the man said, raising the pistol. Where is the girl? And in that moment, Holt knew there was only one choice he could live with. She is gone, Holt said, the lie coming easily. Left this morning before dawn. Hitchhiked east with a trucker headed to Houston. The soft-spoken man's eyes narrowed. You were lying. Search the cabin if you don't believe me. It was a calculated risk. The bed was the obvious hiding place, too obvious perhaps. But Holt was counting on something else. The arrogance of men who saw themselves as predators, who couldn't imagine being outmaneuvered by their prey. The man nodded to Sanchez, who pushed past Holt into the cabin. Holt's heart hammered in his chest as Sanchez moved around the small space, opening the single cupboard, checking the bathroom, kicking at the floorboards. Check under the bed, the soft-spoken man ordered from the doorway, his gun still trained on Holt. Sanchez dropped to his knees, lifting the quilt. Nothing, he reported, standing up. Just dust. Relief washed through Holt, though he kept his face impassive. Somehow Elena had managed to move without being seen, to hide elsewhere in the small cabin. Or perhaps, the thought struck him with sudden clarity, she'd slipped out the window while they were all distracted by the deputy's call from the shore. The soft-spoken man was innate satisfied. Tear the place apart, Amra, he ordered. She's here somewhere. Sir, the deputy called, jogging back from the water's edge. We have got company. County Sheriff's vehicle coming up the road. The soft-spoken man cursed, then gestured with his gun. Inside, all of you. They crowded into the cabin, Holt's mind racing. If Sheriff Vaughn was coming, it could mean help, or more danger. The sheriff's loyalties were still unknown. Through the window, Holt watched the patrol car approach and stop beside the black SUV. Sheriff Vaughn emerged alone, surveying the scene with a practiced eye before heading toward the cabin. What is your play now? Holt asked the soft-spoken man quietly. Shut up. He turned to the deputy. Tell him everything was fine. We found no one here. The deputy nodded, moving to intercept the sheriff on the porch. Their conversation was muted, but Holt caught fragments. False lead, no sign of them, heading back to town. After a moment, the deputy returned. Sheriff wants to see inside for himself. The soft-spoken man swore under his breath, then quickly holstered his weapon as the door opened and Sheriff Vaughn stepped in. The sheriff's gaze swept the room, lingering on Holt. Quite a party you've got here. Just helping these gentlemen with their search, Holt said carefully. For the missing girl, I assume. Vaughn removed his hat. Mind if I have a word with Mr. Holt, alone? The soft-spoken man started to object, but Vaughn cut him off. County business? You boys can wait outside. It wasn't a request. After a tense moment, the soft-spoken man nodded to his companions, and they filed out onto the porch, closing the door behind them. Vaughn waited until their footsteps retreated, then turned to Holt. You've stepped in it this time. Seems that way. Those men are connected, powerful friends in the county seat in Austin. And you? Holt asked bluntly. Who are your friends, Sheriff? Vaughn sighed, suddenly looking older than his years. I've been sheriff here for 22 years, seen a lot of things I couldn't fix, a lot I didn't want to see. but some lines you done it cross." He lowered his voice. "May Grady called me, told me everything." Holt said nothing, unwilling to confirm or deny anything until he was certain of Vaughn A.S.'s position. "Whereas the girl, Holt? Why do you want to know?" Because I got a state police contact waiting for my call, Nooster. Because I got a state police contact waiting for my call, Human Trafficking Task Force. They can have people here in an hour, but I need to know she is safe until then." Holt studied the sheriff's face, looking for deceit and finding only weariness. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You done a T," Vaughn admitted. "But those men out there, they were not leaving without her, and I can hold them off alone." A faint scraping sound came from above them. Both men looked up at the small attic access in the ceiling, a square panel barely large enough for a person to fit through. Vaughn's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't comment. "If I were hiding a girl," Holt said carefully, "I do want guarantees, protection, a new identity. My contact can arrange that. Witness protection." "And the others?" Holt pressed. "The other girls Sanchez mentioned?" Vaughn's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Dozens," he said. "Jesus." The sheriff rubbed his face. "That ass bigger than local. That ass federal. Will your contact handle that too?" "They all have to." Vaughn moved closer, lowering his voice further. "Listen to me. Those men aren't leaving without blood. Yours if they can get hers. I need to get you both out of here." The decision crystallized in Holt's mind. "Oh, there is a boat on the reservoir. May's brother probably. If you can create a distraction, I can get Elena to it." Vaughn nodded. "Give me 5 minutes to get them away from the cabin. There is an access road on the north side of the property. I'll tell them we need to check it." He paused. "Once you agree on the water, head east. There is a ranger station about 3 miles down. My people will meet you there. And if they done a T, then keep going until you hit the dam. There is a service road, usually unguarded. You can hike out from there." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. Holt nodded. 5 minutes. Vaughn replaced his hat and opened the door, his voice changing as he addressed the men outside. "Nothing here, but I want to check that north access before we call it. Sometimes hunters use it. Might have seen something." The soft-spoken man's response was inaudible, but after a moment Holt heard car doors opening and engines starting. He waited until the sounds faded, then moved to the center of the room. "Elena," he called softly. They re-gone. The attic panel shifted and Elena's face appeared in the opening. "Are you sure?" "For now, come down quickly." She lowered herself through the gap with surprising agility, dropping lightly to the floor. Dust covered her clothes and hair, and there was a small cut on her cheek, but she was otherwise unharmed. "How did you—" "The window," she said, while they were looking at the water. "I climbed up on the roof and found the attic access." She brushed dust from her jeans. "The sheriff, can we trust him?" "We don't have much choice." Holt moved to the window, checking that the vehicles were indeed gone from sight. "We need to move. Now." They slipped out of the cabin and into the trees, keeping low, moving quickly toward the shore. The boat was where the deputy had spotted it, a small aluminum fishing boat with an outboard motor, pulled partially onto the rocky beach. "Can you swim?" Holt asked as they reached it. Elena nodded. "Good. If anything happens, if we re-spotted, you swim east along the shore. Don't stop until you reach the ranger station." Together they pushed the boat into the water. The outboard started on the second pull, its noise impossibly loud in the quiet afternoon. Holt steered them away from shore, keeping close to the tree line where shadows would help conceal them. They were halfway across the narrow inlet when the sound of vehicles returning reached them. Holt opened the throttle, abandoning stealth for speed. "They've seen us," Elena said, looking back at the cabin where figures were now running toward the shore. A gunshot cracked across the water, the bullet whining overhead. Then another, closer. "Get down," Holt ordered, pushing her to the floor of the boat. More shots followed, most wide, but one pinged off the outboard with a metallic whine. The engine sputtered, coughed, then died. Out, Holt said, already slipping over the side into the cool water. We swim from here. Elena followed without hesitation. The water was chest deep, the bottom muddy but firm enough to walk on. They waded toward the eastern shore, staying low in the water. Behind them, Holt heard shouting, then the sound of another boat, engine starting. They had minutes at most. There, Elena pointed to a fallen tree that extended from the shore into the water, creating a natural barrier. We can hide under it. They reached it just as the pursuing boat rounded the bend. Holt pulled Elena beneath the tangle of branches, into a pocket of air where the trunk rose above the waterline. They pressed themselves against the muddy bank, barely breathing as the boat motored past, its occupants scanning the shoreline. They'll circle back, Holt whispered, once the sound began to fade. What do we do? Holt considered their options. Swimming would leave them exposed. Hiking through the woods would be slow and they'd leave tracks. They needed a diversion. His gaze fell on the cabin across the water. A plan formed, desperate but possible. I'm going back, he said. When they circle around and come close to shore, I'll create a distraction. You keep going east along the shore. Don T, stop. Don T, look back. Elena gripped his arm. No, they'll kill you. They'll try. Holt carefully extracted himself from the branches. Trust me, Elena, I've been in worse spots. Please, she whispered, her eyes wide. Donati, do this for me. I am not. Holt squeezed her hand once. I am doing it for myself, for Davis, for all the times I should have stood up and didn't tea. Before she could argue further, he slipped back into the water and began swimming, not toward the eastern shore, but back toward the cabin. The pursuing boat was already turning, beginning its second sweep of the shoreline. Holt stayed underwater as much as possible, surfacing only to breathe. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows across the water, helping to conceal his progress. He reached the western shore unseen and pulled himself up behind a stand of cattails. The soft-spoken man and Sanchez had returned to the cabin, leaving the deputy to search by boat. Sheriff Vaughn was nowhere to be seen, either part of the deception or neutralized. Either way, Holt was on his own. He circled through the trees until he reached the black SUV. The keys weren't a T in it, but that didn't matter. He found what he needed in the trunk, a roadside emergency kit with flares and a small gas can for emergencies. The cabin's propane tank sat at the rear of the building. Old, probably leaky, a fire hazard under normal circumstances, a weapon in his current situation. Holt waited until he saw the boat turn back toward the eastern shore, then moved. He unscrewed the valve on the propane tank, the hiss of escaping gas immediate and potent. Next, he splashed the remaining gasoline from the emergency can along the back wall of the cabin, creating a trail away from the building. He was just positioning the flare when a voice behind him said, "I knew you, D, come back." Holt turned to find the soft-spoken man standing 20 feet away, pistol raised. Sanchez hovered behind him, nervous but eager. "Where's the girl?" the man demanded. "Gone," Holt said truthfully. "Beyond your reach." "Nothing is beyond my reach." The man stepped closer. "But you were right here. And after we kill you, we'll find her. Might take time, but we'll find her." "No," Holt said calmly. "You won, T." He struck the flare against the striker cap. It ignited with a hiss and a flare of magnesium bright light. The soft-spoken man's eyes widened as he realized Holt's intention. He fired, the bullet grazing Holt's shoulder as he dove sideways, tossing the flare toward the gasoline trail. The world exploded into flame and noise. Holt rolled behind a tree as the propane tank ignited, the concussion washing over him in a wave of heat and pressure. The cabin disintegrated, wood and glass becoming projectiles that scythed through the air. When the ringing in his ears subsided, Holt pushed himself to his feet. Where the cabin had stood was only flame and smoke. Of the soft-spoken man and Sanchez, there was no sign. In the distance, sirens wailed. County vehicles, state police, fire trucks. Help finally, but too late to matter. Holt turned east, toward the reservoir, toward where he hoped Elena had continued to safety. He found her a half-mile down the shore, huddled behind a rock outcropping. Her eyes widened at the sight of him, clothes singed, blood seeping from the wound on his shoulder, but alive. "And you came back," she whispered, echoing the soft-spoken man's words but with an entirely different meaning. "I said I would." Together they continued east, following the shoreline until the ranger station came into view. 3 police cruisers were parked outside, their lights flashing silently. Sheriff Vaughn stood on the dock scanning the water. When he spotted them, he raised a hand in acknowledgement. "Will it be over now?" Elena asked as they approached. Holt thought of Sanchez's words, dozens more where she came from, and knew it was far from over. But for now, for her, perhaps it could be. "Yes," he said. "For you, it's over." At the ranger station, state police officers wrapped Elena in a blanket and led her to a waiting car. A female officer sat beside her, already making calls about safe houses and protective custody. Holt watched from a distance as Vaughn coordinated with the human trafficking task force, setting in motion the machinery that would, with luck, find the other girls Sanchez had mentioned. As evening fell, Holt found himself alone on the dock, watching the smoke still rising from across the reservoir. A medic had bandaged his shoulder and tried to convince him to go to the hospital, but he refused. Elena appeared beside him, the blanket still around her shoulders. "I think we're taking me to Austin tonight," she said. "Protective custody until they can find the others." Holt nodded. "You'll be safe there." "What about you?" "I'll be fine." She studied him, her eyes older than her years. "They said I might have to testify about what happened to me, about the others. You were brave enough. Will you be there?" The question was small, vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be until now. Holt hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew the photograph he'd taken from her backpack. Elena and her mother, standing before their small house with its flowering vine. The photograph was damp from their swim, but otherwise intact. "Keep this," he said, pressing it into her hand. "And yes, I'll be there." She clutched the photo, her fingers tracing her mother's face. "Why did you help me? Really?" Holt looked out over the water, to where the sun was setting behind the distant hills. The same sun that had set over Fallujah, over the house where he'd stood by and done nothing while innocents died. The same sun that had watched as he'd walked away from Davis as fight for justice. "Because sometimes you get a chance to make a different choice," he said finally, "and if you lucky, you take it." An officer approached, telling Elena it was time to leave. She nodded, then turned back to Holt. "Thank you," she said simply, and embraced him briefly before following the officer to the waiting car. Holt remained on the dock, watching until the taillights disappeared around the bend. In his pocket was the key to the wooden ammo crate in his cabin, the one containing his medals Davis' letter and the small teddy bear from the rubble. All gone now in the explosion, reduced to ash, yet somehow the weight he'd carried for years felt lighter. As darkness fell completely, Holt turned away from the water and began the long walk back to town. Behind him, the last of the smoke dissipated into the night sky. Ahead, the road stretched empty and uncertain. The girl had been given to him as payment for a debt, but in saving her, perhaps he had begun to repay a different debt altogether, one he owed to Davis, to the family in Fallujah, to himself. "And you, what debt would you pay with your life as remaining hours?"